again to the Holy Scriptures to search for your wisdom. For wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Amen. Our scripture reading for today comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, one of my favorites. I say that a lot, but it's often true. And so I will be reading the whole first chapter, 1 through 18, not that bad. And as I go through the sermon, there's a couple of other short chunks of it that I will read as well, but we're going to focus on this for right now. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has already been, in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity and a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a chasing after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase in knowledge increase sorrow. Everybody see why this is one of my favorite books? It's so exciting and uplifting. Genuinely, when I was younger, I wrote notes. I'm not going to use a single one of them. This is going to be off the cuff. So it might meander a little, but I'm going somewhere, I promise. When I was younger, middle school, high school, Ecclesiastes was probably one of my absolute favorite books to read for a variety of reasons. I think one nice thing about it is that it's not just a story. I shouldn't say that too much. None of it's just a story. But it isn't a narrative, right? It doesn't have characters necessarily that do a set things. It is advice. It is kind of an exploration of ideas that is more or less equally valid now than it was at the time. Admittedly, we know some things the author doesn't, but humans haven't changed all that much in the last thousands of years. And so ultimately, it's a great collection of a handful of paragraphs about this subject and then a handful of paragraphs about this other thing. And it's all about understanding life and the world we live in and what to do with it. So I appreciated that greatly when I was younger. And I memorized big chunks of this book, which annoyed people because The advice in Ecclesiastes does not sound a whole lot like the advice we read elsewhere in Scripture. And so there's this tension that it brings up that I think we need more of rather than less of. Just as a little background on the book itself, Ecclesiastes, which here is right next to Proverbs, other wisdom literature, things like that, is the title of it claims that it's Solomon, but it is definitely written at the earliest during the Persian period, so we're looking at 450 BC at the absolute earliest, because a lot of the language in it borrows from Aramaic. It borrows from the language that became dominant after the exile into the Persian period. That there's no way they would have had access to a lot of that beforehand. So it's at the very least Persian. A lot of scholars point out that both the content and sort of the style are very, very Greek. So a lot of scholars will push it between 300 and 150, sort of the Seleucid Empire after Alexander the Great. So somewhere between 450 and 150, we get this text talking about wisdom in a very, very sad way. And that's a fascinating period of time just because it is the point at which we get all over the world, not even just in this region, but in India and in China and around the Mediterranean, there's just suddenly this explosion of people thinking through things in a way that we don't have a lot of records of previously. That puts it at the same time period as people like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the pre-Socratic philosophers, the sophists. It puts it right on par with a lot of other discussion about what are we doing here that isn't just sort of a reflection of expectations and duties, but it has a little bit more depth of thought. And so this book is, some scholars are honestly confused as to why this is in the canon. Very much like Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, it doesn't feel like a biblical text in a lot of ways, which is good. I'm fine with that because it makes it then a perfect foil, a balance. It's not that it doesn't include references to God, to living the good life in the context of the Lord. It's just that it is a counterpoint to a lot of other things. It provides another very important and valuable perspective, which is to say that I cannot imagine any of you have made it this far in life without feeling like this at some point. I can't, because I know I have, right? We have bad times in life. There are moments that are very, very dark. And there is a generic expectation within our culture overall, within kind of broader Christianity specifically, that we should never really be sad. I don't know if anybody else has felt the pressure of that, but there is this weird expectation that somehow as Christians, we should just be fine all the time with everything. And that is horrifically unrealistic, because that's not how life works. And our insistence on making it that way is not healthy for us, and it's not helpful when we see people suffering, when we see people who are sad or depressed, when we see people dealing with this stuff, to insist that they need to look on the bright side. I don't know if anybody in here is a Monty Python fan, but if you are, and you've ever seen the Monty Python show, The Life of Brian, which is admittedly a joke on Jesus, right? Because Brian is born in the stable next to Jesus and gets confused for the Messiah over and over again. It's very funny if you don't take it too seriously, and it's not supposed to be taken seriously. But at the end, when Brian is being crucified, the people around him, the dozens of people being crucified around him, start singing, "Always look on the bright side of life." And there's just that moment of all of these people being horrifically executed, singing, "Always look on the bright side of life." That matches very much this weird pressure we have to always be okay. We don't have to be. Because Ecclesiastes is right. There is a certain meaninglessness to everything when we're willing to drop the noise and sit and think about it for a second. The word here translated as vanity at the beginning, and it comes up again and again and again in the book. The word means literally breath or mist, and it refers to something that is utterly ephemeral, right? That has no substance, that doesn't last. It is sort of empty or useless or meaningless, right? And yet at the same time is entirely necessary. We don't live without breath, even though breath itself is really not, once it's out, it's gone. And it is only there for the briefest of moments, chasing after the wind. This author looks around the world and says it doesn't matter how long the river runs into the sea is never full, right? It never fills up. And no matter how much we see, our eyes are never full, right? Everything keeps going. And for the author, that's enough to say this is just this sort of endless loop and cycle, whatever we do. I think I can make it worse, okay? We've had a couple thousand years. On the front of your bulletin, I put a picture of the Milky Way galaxy, right? And it didn't copy super clearly, but you can see kind of in the middle towards the bottom, there's a little dot with all the lines coming out from it, and that is where our solar system is located, in this random little spur on an arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And if you take a nickel, you set this down and you take a nickel and put it on our sun, on this picture, every star you can see with your eyes in the sky is inside that nickel. All of them. And that is one nickel worth of space in this galaxy, and there are as many of these galaxies as stars as we can see. And so this author only had a few thousand miles to consider and realize how small he was. No matter how important he was locally, how small and meaningless life was. We are the smallest of specks of sand in the largest of beaches imaginable. And if we put that nickel down and everything underneath it just suddenly ceased to exist, the universe would not notice. It wouldn't. We would, obviously, but it wouldn't. Ecclesiastes is coming to terms with what it means to be a tiny part of something so large that we ultimately can't individually or to some extent collectively understand it or change it. We can redo things all the time, but that doesn't make it important on that scale. It makes it important on our scale. So what do we do with that as people? Well, we're reading through this book and trying to understand what to do with life. Because this book is full of things that help you understand what you should do. Right, that's what I come and talk about every day. How we should take this and what we should do with it in our life. And then we get a book here in the middle that says, it doesn't matter. I really hope at some point you take the time to read through all of Ecclesiastes. It's not a long book. I want to pull out just a couple of lines that are from it that I think are really helpful for us. The goal of this book isn't to make you sad. The goal of this book is to acknowledge we feel this way at times. if we stop distracting ourselves from it all the time, and to acknowledge that that is not unfaithful or wrong, it is real, and it is something that we have to come to terms with. And accepting that and acknowledging what that means is extremely helpful for actually getting through our lives together. There's two pieces in particular I want to bring up. One of them is extremely personal to me, and so I think that makes it meaningful for me to present. There is a verse, Ecclesiastes 9, chapter 9, verse 11. My favorite one verse in this whole book, and the one that I think we desperately need to remember, desperately in the modern era need to remember. And it simply says this. I'm not going to read it. I like the King James version of it better, honestly. I won't say that too many times. The King James translation is not a fantastic academic translation. But once in a while, it is poetry, and I will absolutely accept that. It says, the race is not to the swift, nor is the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the educated, but time and chance happen to them all. Okay? So we'll unpack that for a second. The race is not to the swift. The fastest person will not win every single race, right? Because that speed is dependent on all kinds of factors. If the fastest person in the world has to run a race in Antarctica, they may not function as well in the cold. If that person is sick on the day of the race, they may not perform as well as they would otherwise. There are all kinds of factors that go into winning a race that are not just who holds the world record for the fastest sprint over this distance. If the race is longer or shorter, they may not win, because how you use your body for a race differs depending on if you're going this far or this far, right? The battle is not to the strong. I'm a big history nerd. I love history. And I think we overly rely on talking about war when we talk about history. But nonetheless, if you look back at the wars through history, there are all kinds of stories of smaller, weaker forces winning, right? We love those stories. Because there are things that matter in a battle beyond just the number of soldiers you have or how many weapons are on your side, right? There's so many more factors that go into it. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor. Wealth to the brilliant. I don't know how many people here are familiar with the inventor Nikola Tesla, late 1800s to early 1900s. Absolute genius of a man. Worked with Thomas Edison for a while, and Edison got mad at him because he was better than Edison at like everything. And so Edison tried to sue him over and over and over. It was a mess. Nikola Tesla invented not just things that we still use, but invented the things that are the basis for things that we now are like cornerstones of civilization. So he invented the alternating current electrical grid, right? How all electricity transmission is done throughout the world. That was his system that he designed. He's the basis of helicopter motors. His technology became wireless internet and remote controls, okay? In the late 18 and early 1900s, he was working on remote transmission of stuff. All kinds of things. The man spent his whole life broke, absolutely in poverty, because he didn't care about money. It didn't matter how smart he was, how educated, how brilliant he was. He didn't care about money. So he spent his whole life broke, trying to come up with new and fascinating things for the benefit of people. So yeah, wealth does not come to the brilliant. And we can make sense out of each of those things, but here's where the rubber hits the road. When my first son, before my first son was born, my son Drexel, he's been here a number of times. I know most of you have met him. 13 now. Before he was born, his mother had something called a subchorionic hemorrhage, which means there is a blood vessel that burst under part of the placenta. And from the moment that happened, they said there is a 50% chance he will not survive to being born. So for about half of the pregnancy, And there's nothing they can do about it. It's literally just flip a coin if he's going to make it or not. And obviously, he did. But that was a gamble right there. And he was fine for a while, and then I became a pastor in Lake City. That's kind of where I did most of my work. And shortly before his second birthday, he stopped walking. Just stopped. He would not get up. And we brought him in and found out that he had broken his femur, which is hard to do for anybody. It's doable, obviously, but it's hard to do because that is a very thick, hefty bone. It's really hard for not quite 2-year-olds to do it because their bones are still a little more flexible. So they put a cast on him, and he spent his second birthday, the month after that, in a cast. And we were getting ready to take that cast off when we noticed there's a bunch of little red spots all over him. We weren't sure if it was an allergic reaction or what was going on, but it was just a couple days before his cast came off. Brought him in to get checked, and they did a blood test and discovered he had leukemia. Now, when we had him, this was our first child, which means it's the one that we put all our effort into doing everything right for. Subsequent children don't quite get that. But let's be honest. It's different on the first time around, okay? So he had like no screen time almost his whole life. We kept him outside and running and active. We made his baby food with stuff we grew in my parents' garden out on their farm. So we grew it there, so it had never touched a grocery store. There was no pesticides on it or anything like that. We grew it ourselves. We ground it up to make baby food. So he didn't eat commercial stuff. We did everything right that you could do right, health-wise, for this child. And he got cancer shortly after his second birthday. Probably started before. It's probably why he broke his leg, because leukemia affects your bone marrow, the inside of the bones, which weakens it. So he spent 3 years going through chemotherapy, and he didn't respond well to that, so it got kind of touch and go for a while. It was a nightmare. He's fine now, as you all have seen. Kind of a jerk, but he's 13. It is to be expected. And here's the thing. Here's why it matters. Time and chance happen to us all. It didn't matter that we did everything right, taking care of him. He got cancer. And that wasn't, he wasn't given cancer. God didn't reach down and decide, yes, this one gets cancer. He didn't get cancer for a reason. He didn't get cancer to prove something or test something. It just happens. It happens. It happens. And it's not good, it's bad. At no point do I have to look at that situation and say, oh, something good will come out of this. I sure hope so. That doesn't make it good or okay. And we don't have to try and justify it. And I say this because for years, people came up to his mother and I and said all kinds of things about, oh, you guys are so strong going through this together. Well, you can do a lot of things when you don't have a choice. And all the stuff that'll come out of this, that doesn't make it okay. Don't try to make things okay that aren't okay, please. And I'm not angry about this, per se, except that I have a lot of friends with stuff going wrong in their lives, medically or otherwise, doesn't really matter. Stuff goes wrong in life. Bad things happen to all of us. And I imagine all of you have had terrible things happen, and somebody said something that was supposed to be affirming and helpful, and it wasn't, because it's not. And more than that, I bet you've done it. I've done it. We're all guilty. It happens. But time and chance happen to us all. There's no purpose in it. What we have at our disposal is redemption. We can say, I went through this bad thing, and because of that, I can use what I learned from that. I can use what happened to do good things in the future. I went through this with my son So I know what it's like. So when other people are going through similar things, I know not to say some stuff now. And I know I can at least be there for them in as much as I know what it's like. And I'm not scared of it, and I don't feel ashamed about it, and I'm not bothered by it as much because I've been there. I can redeem that experience. That's not the same as it being good or okay or useful. I have so many friends whose lives are falling apart. And here's why we desperately need to remember this, right? Out of time and chance and meaninglessness. Because we collectively as a civilization have more or less seemed to decide that people get what they deserve. And they don't. Not how life works. When we find out terrible things are happening to people, how often do we hear, oh, well, they shouldn't have, or if only they didn't, or once they clean this up, or worse than that, I think, is when things go really well for people and we try to look to them to see what they've done right to justify and earn it. You know what? This cuts both ways. Just because good things happen to people doesn't mean they deserve it either. And it says that in here all over the place too, in Proverbs as well. The unjust and the wicked profit and benefit from the suffering of others. Time and chance happen to us all. It's not all with a purpose or a plan. It can be redeemed. We can do our best to redeem it by going somewhere with it and doing something with it. But it is an opportunity. Even Jesus, we comes across a blind guy, and I know we talked about this a while back, and people are like, oh, what did this guy do to deserve being blind? Right? Because he was born blind. And Jesus said, nothing. Like, he didn't deserve it. He is blind so that you have an opportunity to do something good. Not because he was made blind so that you can do something good, but the existence of people with struggles and difficulties, which is all of us, is an opportunity for us to do good and show care and concern for one another. Time and chance happen to us all. The universe is not just. It is not fair. It does not give us what we deserve. This whole book, largely, is the story of ancient peoples trying to figure out what it means to live in an unjust world. That is where all the discussions of life after death start in here. Because in the oldest stuff, there's almost nothing. And then as people try and deal with concepts like justice and fairness, it is only then that we develop an understanding up through Jesus of it might not be fair now. The hope is that it becomes some sort of fair afterwards. That there is some semblance of justice ultimately, because it isn't here. Meaninglessness is the basis on which we are equally charged with working and helping one another, with which we all suffer equally and we can all support each other equally and not judgmentally. There's one more line in here I want to go into. The conclusion the author comes to, like Hosea last week that I talked about, where he puts the summary at the front, and then you have to read the whole book to actually understand the summary. Ecclesiastes, very much the same way. In that, in chapter 2, there is a line, 224. This is the author's ultimate summary for what it means to exist in a cosmos that ultimately is chasing after the wind, where anything we do is fundamentally without ultimate meaning. There is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. This also is from the hand of God. Eat, drink, and make the best of it. That's it. That is what we're here to do. That's how we survive the void, is we march on and make the most of life. And what's funny about that to me is that, once again, I've been here now years, literal years, and I have talked again and again about what the authors in this different place asks out of life, right? What God is speaking through the prophets, through Jesus, and it's all about what we do with our lives. And there's critiques of accumulating wealth, and there's critiques of violence, and there's one thing after another after another. When you take all of that into consideration and put it all together, the life that God seems to want for all of us is one where we have enough to eat and drink and make the most of our toil in life together, all of us. That's it. That's the goal. We talked about this last week. Even Plato comes to the same conclusion, right, in the Republic, that the best life is where we have our cakes of bread, and we run around in comfortable clothing that's seasonally appropriate, and we sing our little songs, and we hang out with our friends and families, and we get by. That's the goal. All of this book is just talking about all the things that get in the way of that, how we get in the way of each other doing that. Making sure that all of us have the things that we need and deserve, make sure all of us are cared for and supported and can work together so that we can all make the most out of life. Because when push comes to shove, life has all kinds of meaning because we decide that it does. Because we make it have meaning. It is utterly absurd, and that's totally fine. It can be absurd. There's a great line that Paul has in 1 Corinthians where it is oh man, I wish I had written it down now. It just popped into my head. I hadn't actually prepared for this. But it is the small things and the silly things and the things that don't matter that confound the wise. And that God has asked us not necessarily to be wise in the ways of the world, but to be wise in the ways of God. To be childlike. And we always argue about what that means. You know how children don't care about reality, right? Children are full of wonder. You can't tell them they can't do something, right? They will try and do it anyways, because it doesn't matter. This can be true, that we are infinitesimally small and meaningless, and yet we should live like we matter. Because we do. Because there's nothing else we can do. And that's perfect. So sometimes we're going to feel like the author of Ecclesiastes. We're going to feel like it doesn't matter and we shouldn't bother. And then we can look at it and say, well, keep going anyways. Because you know what? It didn't feel like this last week, and maybe it won't feel like this next week. There's just a random little story I've heard a number of times. I don't know where it originates from. There's a guy walking down the beach, and he sees another person grabbing up starfish that have been kind of trapped in this little tide pool way up the beach and throwing them back into the ocean. And the guy's like, what are you doing? There's no way you're going to have the time to toss them all back in before they start drying out or anything. It happens every day. It's just the way things go. You're not going to change the world. And the guy grabs another star and throws it out into the water and says, well, I changed that one's world. We don't have to change the cosmos, because we're not. But we can change the world for the better for each other. And that's enough. That's enough. So, don't keep yourself so busy inside that you never hear the questions and the voices Don't keep yourself so busy that you refuse to acknowledge there is darkness, because there is. It's here. It's in us and around us. We should not ever ignore it. But don't get stuck there either. Keep going. Together. And together, we make little lights in the darkness. Just like this. It's not meaningless. Amen.